Solving some of the world's biggest problems often takes novel or creative ideas. And for those who think outside the box, the results can be very successful. This week on Full Frame, conversations with those who are tackling issues like world hunger, climate change, and other global problems in unusual ways to make the world a better place. I'm Mei Lee in Los Angeles. Let's take it full frame. While some people merely dream of changing the world, for award-winning British filmmaker Richard Curtis, it's a reality. The man behind such international hits as Love Actually and Bridget Jones' Diary is also co-founder of the hugely successful Comic Relief and Red Nose Day fundraising events. In life and on film, Curtis seems to perfectly capture both humor and humanity.
Some days you want to relive forever. You marry me?
I think I'll go for yes.
Some days you only want to live once.
I am so uninterested in a life without your father.
It never occurred to me that I might lose you.
I never said you could fix everything. Not without consequences.
So I was wondering if you might care for dinner on Friday night.
Don't you dare!
I'm king of the world! You got a boyfriend?
I have father, and he's perfect.
Bernard told me he was getting engaged to Lydia. I congratulated him because all his other girlfriends have been such complete dogs. Although, may I say how delighted we are to have so many of them here this evening.
Tell me, are you married?
No.
Are you a lesbian? What made you say that? Which is a bit more interesting than saying, oh dear, just never found the right chap, eh? Quite right.
They're all such great movies. Well, his most recent venture is Project Everyone, an effort to promote the United Nations 2015 global goals and the 17 objectives to improve 3 critical issues plaguing our world by the year 2030: extreme poverty, climate change, and inequality and injustice. I recently caught up with Richard in New York, where he was attending the annual Social Good Summit. The passionate philanthropist joined other changemakers who are thinking outside the box to make a global impact. You're obviously a very accomplished producer, writer, director of some movies that are beloved worldwide.
Hated by some, hated by some.
Not too many, though, I don't think. I mean, Notting Hill.
My sons are starting to be embarrassed about them.
Oh,
They're
really?
too romantic, too much kissing, yeah.
Oh, no. But well, women, of course, like me, love them. But you also have this other passion, and that is humanitarian and trying to change the world for the better. So that your heart seems to belong to those causes as well. Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, there may be a kind of psychological thing in the background. When I was young, we lived in the Philippines, so I was very aware of the contrast between how we were living and the poorest people. So that was something that worried me when I was young. But strangely, I think it's probably, that I was inspired by somebody doing the kind of thing I try and do now, which was Bob Geldof's Band Aid and Live Aid initiative, and the absolute clarity of him saying it cannot be true that people are starving to death, actually starving in our modern world, that made me think I have to give some time to this. And then I sort of now do the 2 jobs together.
And was that a turning point for you when you saw Live Aid, Band Aid? I mean, because that was really such a momentous occasion worldwide.
Yeah, it was a huge turning point. And what happened was that I volunteered to go with a friend who was going into the area, into Sudan and Ethiopia, to look at the famine, to, as it were, keep her company. And the things that I saw there were probably the most profound turning point, because I saw things of terrible sorrow happening to huge numbers of people. But the strange thing was, the history of what I've done is the charity that I've worked for all these years does comedy, uses comedy to raise money. And one of the things I most remember was going into one of the camps where things were worst, seeing a little child being put into a weighing machine, which was like a sort of nappy. The child was put into the machine and because there was no muscle in its legs, it flipped. Its leg flipped up and it fell through one leg of this little plastic nappy. And everybody laughed, and I thought, they don't know they're tragic. People are meant to laugh and love, and there's no contradiction in raising money by using laughter.
Right. Well, speaking of laughter, comic relief, that was your baby, and then Red Nose Day, and you've raised $1.5 billion.
Yeah, that's right, so far.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and of course I think it's a sign of the fact that when actually directly faced with other people's suffering and problems, most people in the world are profoundly decent. Most people would not walk on by. And what we do on Red Nose Day is put on a really entertaining night of TV and then intersperse it with films about the need and say to people, you know, you're having a happy night, do you want to give some money? And I think that people really react well to that. And
I like the idea that people are profoundly good at, you know, if you really look at humanity. Do you think that's continually changing for the better? Do you think because people are becoming more aware of the world's ailments and the world's needs that people are willing to try to take action rather than sit back and say, oh, what can I do?
Well, I think that I read this book, or as usual, I read the introduction to a book, because I find books a bit long, just saying that one of the reasons why we think the world is getting worse is because actually it's getting better and we're more aware of and shocked by the things that are cruel and unfair. You know, they used to execute people in the streets in England in 1800 and nobody minded. And now, you know, we don't have anything like that happening. So when cruelty does happen, you think that's absolutely horrific, but it's because there's so much less of it. I mean, one of the reasons that I've been pushing these new global goals for sustainable development is because I think that there are hugely positive things happening, and the news tends to report the negative things.
Yes, we do.
So, you know, and that's in fact one of the arguments of when people say my films are unrealistic. I don't understand that at all, because you see a film about someone being murdered by a serial killer, which has only happened like 4 times in history, and people say that's a searingly realistic film about society. And I make films about people falling in love, which is happening every single street in every single country of the world, and people say it's sentimental and ridiculous. Whereas, so amazing things are happening. Terrible things happen from time to time, but then in the last 15 years, 2 billion people have got clean water, 50 million more kids have gone to school, malaria's been cut by, I think, 710,000 a year, so amazingly good things are happening. And I love the idea of a plan which says actually there is a positive view of how things are going in the world, and that we should really fight for that rather than being demoralized by the bad things.
Well, that's your mission now. Your project is tied to the global goals, the UN global goals. 17 pretty amazingly difficult goals, I would say.
17's a lot, but there's a chap called John MacArthur who is a great expert, was one of the people who wrote the Millennium Development Goals, and he was fighting, like I was, for there to be fewer. Okay. And he said he spoke to his mum about it, and she said, that sounds about right. It's a complicated world. You know, if you just try and reduce it to a convenient number, and what's really interesting about these goals is they have a proper and deep analysis of poverty and the problems of the world. You know, they do actually include jobs. They do include industry. They do include equality.
Education.
Education, climate, justice. It's all of these things. It's actually saying if you're going to solve poverty, it will not be just some rich countries giving some money to some poor countries, because that way those countries will always stay poor.
Right.
So I mean, 17, it's been tricky, but
it's overwhelming, though.
No, I don't think it is, because
really?
we've been starting to talk to a lot of kids about it, and they look at it, and you say, what's your goal? Which one of these are you interested in? And then they find that exciting. They say, well, this is the one. I'm interested in, the seas. I'm interested in the oceans. I'm interested in equality. And I think that what's confusing is when every time you hear about a problem, you just think, oh, that's another problem, another problem, another problem. And I think that what you could do now is you could take every charity and every NGO And you could say, so what's amnesty? Well, amnesty is actually peace and justice, is number 16. What's Greenpeace? Well, Greenpeace is climate action 14, 15. So it actually, I think, is a big way to organize the feelings of the problems of the world.
Right. So it's a way to map it out almost and sort of direct and categorize what the work is.
Yeah, what the work to be done is, exactly.
But obviously with your background, being in film and media, you're utilizing your skills to be able to get this word out, to get the messages out, to get, educate
I mean, I think that's so important.
Yeah. And you've done it in a creative way, using big names, everyone from Jennifer Lopez to Stephen Hawking to
Jennifer Lopez to Jennifer Lawrence.
Exactly.
The whole long journey.
J-Lo and J-Lo. So
Exactly.
it's across the board.
Yeah.
There's something to that, right? It does reach the masses that way, doesn't it? And when
that is one of the things. We're also trying to, I've got this slogan in my life, which is to make things happen, you have to make things. You can't just hope. So what we've tried, Liverpool football team wore a shirt which had globals on. We made those shirts so that all the billion people who watch a Liverpool football match will see global goals. We made little films which have gone out. We made a projection to go on the wall of the UN. We made a little book which has got lots and lots of stickers in it that children can stick up. I've just tried to make things. There's no point me, who's a maker of films and entertainment and sketches, coming in and writing a political pamphlet. I wanted to try and make stuff. The ad is great. It's made by Aardman, and what it is the moment when the goals were agreed by every country in the world, but the leader of the world is represented by the animal that represents that country. So the whole UN is full of llamas and turtles and polar bears.
I love
and everything like that.
That's great.
We have a plan. The global goals for people and planet. To end poverty. To fight inequalities. And to defeat climate change. And I am proud to announce the plan is agreed by everyone.
The United Nations has launched a plan to fight poverty, injustice, and climate change. Tell everyone. Join us at globalgoals.org.
Well, the other side of getting things done, of course, is politics.
Yeah.
Because it's all about policy and people then agreeing to those policies and then executing those policies.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's where it gets stuck.
Yeah.
There's an agreement, but then there's no execution, or it just falls through the cracks. Is that a frustrating aspect to the work that you're trying to get done?
No, I think it's an important aspect. One of the inspirations for what I'm doing is that Bob Geldof, who I then got to know, said to me once that he made more money in 20 minutes having a cup of tea with President Mitterrand than he did in the whole of Live Aid and Band Aid.
Wow.
He said politics is where the money is.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons for doing a campaign like this is so that when politicians talk about issues to do with global responsibility, which is a tough thing for politicians because people just want, their own lives to be better first. That's the first thing a politician has to deliver. When politicians talk about those things, people will recognize that it's something that they believe in. So China's just made an enormous commitment to extra aid. Well, we would like the people to feel when they hear that news, that's odd, not that's odd, that's going to people abroad. They say, oh yeah, I read those global goals and I agreed with them. I actually don't want hunger, I actually don't want poverty, I actually do want girls to go to school. So good for that 2 billion, and actually then you allow people within countries to say, well, wait a minute, I've read these goals, and actually you promised. And so I hope that as well as educating people, it, one, gives cover for politicians and puts pressure on politicians. And of course it's frustrating when politicians don't do the things you hope they will, but my kids don't put on their shoes in the morning. The world's frustrating.
Right. From the little things to the big things, right? Well, let's talk about Asia a little bit more. You just mentioned China and its contribution. Are you putting more focus on efforts in China to try to get a little bit more of a movement going on in that region?
Yeah, we've never not included it. It's always seemed to us incredibly important that we should try and get China involved. If you look at the Millennium Development Goals, the reason why the sort of most important one, which is extreme poverty, the reason that has been halved is enormously due to the improvements in people's lives in China over the last 15 years. Otherwise, we would not, it's not half the world that's got less poor outside China, it's including that. So it seemed to us very important, and we've had, you know, the support of celebrities there, and the support of cinemas there, and the support of schools there. And, you know, it's absolutely crucial with these goals that it's everywhere in the world. And we would absolutely love to feel that China will be an increasingly big player in trying to, you know, make life better, not only in China, but abroad. It's this idea of mutuality.
2030, let's look ahead.
Yeah.
When we get there, what do you think this world is going to look like if these goals are pursued in the way that you'd like them to be pursued?
Well, I think that, you know, you have to really pray there's serious progress on climate change. That has to, I mean, and one of the most important things about this campaign was to set people up to feel passionate for the COP talks in Paris, another area where China's suddenly making really strong, positive moves. You have to hope that we aren't leaving our kids that ghastly inheritance of you know, refugees because of desertification and refugees because of flooding and all those sort of things. So that would be a big thing. I feel there'll be enormous progress on gender equality as well. You would really hope that both in positions of responsibility, but also in every single school, that those things have happened. You would hope that no one is dying of hunger anymore. That would seem absolutely something that you would pray for. So I think that there are lots of things that we could look forward to. And we probably won't notice them because Brad Pitt will probably be divorcing Angelina Jolie, and everybody will think the world's the most ghastly mess because of that.
You're right.
But actually,
you're right.
I'm hoping that I'll be there on stage in my wheelchair, saying good things have occurred.
And what's next for you then? I mean, obviously you're going to continue all of these projects that you have going, but you seem like
I'm going to write one more film.
You are?
Yeah. I'm going to write one more film, but then I'm going to stop that because I feel as though this is a beautiful and wonderful world and I haven't seen enough of it. And I've spent all my time looking at my fingers typing, and I should have been traveling. I've been to China once for a week. I'd like to go there for a month. I've never been, you know, to so many wonderful places and, you know, so many films I haven't seen.
Well, we've been blessed with a beautiful planet that we need to take care of, so we got to see it. All right.
That's what I would hope to do. And then I'll keep an eye on the goals and try and write one funny little film a year for 15 years.
Well, we would love that, of course. I think all your fans would love to have more films from you. But we also love the work that you're doing. It's incredible that you're dedicating your time and effort like this.
Well, I had a very happy childhood and a happy life, and if you can make any difference to other people, then that's an easy thing to do.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
That's so sweet of you.
Coming up next, how one powerhouse technology brand is minimizing the environmental footprint of your electronics.